Okay, so are you ready to dive in? Tonight we're on the hunt for werewolves. You guys have sent in some really fascinating stuff, historical accounts, cultural myths, even some modern-day encounters. Looks like somebody's been doing some late-night research.
You know it.
So tonight our mission is to sort of separate facts from fiction. We're going to try to figure out how these stories evolved across different cultures, and maybe, just maybe, we'll uncover some surprising explanations for what people are seeing out there.
Yeah, I think a good place to start would be to go all the way back to the very beginning. You know, the root of it all, ancient Greece, and the myth of King Lycaon.
King Lycaon. The king who decided to serve Zeus, the king of the gods, a human sacrifice.
Yeah, not a good move.
Not the best way to win over the Almighty.
No, definitely not. And, you know, as you might expect, Zeus was not happy about this, not at all. And transformed Lycaon into a wolf as punishment.
Talk about a bad case of indigestion. Right? I mean, this story really gives us a vivid picture of how ancient cultures viewed werewolves. You know, it wasn't just a creature of the night, but a symbol of transgression. You know, crossing the line, facing divine retribution.
A cautionary tale, you know, kind of reminds us that even kings can be humbled by nature, by the wildness that sort of lurks within us all. But werewolves aren't just in ancient Greece. These shape-shifting creatures, they pop up in cultures all around the world. And each culture has its own unique twist on this legend.
Yeah, absolutely. The Nuri, for example. This ancient tribe that was mentioned by the Greek historian Herodotus, they were said to transform into wolves once a year. Yeah. So imagine that. You're at your annual block party, and your neighbor suddenly sprouts fangs and fur.
Yeah, that would liven up the neighborhood watch a little bit.
Yeah, definitely spice things up. But it's interesting, though, how this yearly transformation connects back to themes of cyclical change, you know, like the ebb and flow of nature, and kind of suggests a different type of relationship with the wolf, one that's less about punishment and more about, you know, embracing that wild side, if only for a little while.
Yeah, it's like they were tapping into that primal energy of the wolf, drawing on its strength and ferocity for a specific purpose.
Yeah, and speaking of primal energy, the Haitian Girouge, this is a werewolf that not only transforms, but also possesses people, driving them to commit acts of cannibalism.
That's a whole other level of terrifying.
Whole other level.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's a great example of how werewolf lore often mixes with local beliefs and fears. So in this case, you know, the fear of cannibalism, which is a real fear in some cultures, becomes intertwined with the supernatural. So it gives it a tangible form.
Right, like they're giving their deepest fears a name, a face, a way to maybe confront them through storytelling.
Exactly.
But while some cultures viewed werewolves with fear and suspicion, others, like the Vikings, had a more complex relationship with them.
Yeah, the Vikings, they were obsessed with wolves. Legendary obsession. They both revered the wolf's strength, you know, seeing it as a reflection of their warrior spirit, but they also feared its power because, you know, it was a threat to their livestock and communities.
That duality is so interesting. It's like they understood that nature has a double edge, that wildness has the potential for both creation and destruction.
Right, and this duality wasn't just limited to their myths and legends. I mean, the very word Viking became tied to wolves, at least in the eyes of the people that they raided. So it transformed them into these savage, wolf-like warriors, you know, in the minds of their enemies.
It's such a powerful example of how these legends can become wrapped up with history and identity and even propaganda. And by kind of embracing that wolf imagery, the Vikings, maybe without even realizing it, they fueled the fears of the people they encountered. And that just further blurred the line between, you know, human and beast. Yep. So, I mean, you've got these ancient Greeks who feared divine retribution. You've got Haitians battling with the horrors of cannibalism. And then the Vikings kind of embracing the wolf as both a symbol of power and as a label, you know, of fear. It's just this fascinating tapestry of different beliefs and interpretations.
So what is it about the werewolf? Why is it such a recurring theme in our stories and cultures all around the world and throughout history?
That's the question, isn't it? I think it's because they represent the wild, the untamed side of nature. Werewolves embody that fear of losing control, of being consumed by primal instincts. You're the beast within us all.
I see what you mean. It's like a warning about the violence and chaos that's just beneath the surface of civilization. It's a reminder that we're not as far removed from the forces of nature as we might think.
Right, and that fear, it can be a really powerful tool. A great example of that is the French Catholics, who believe that if you broke the rules of Lent for 7 years straight, you'd turn into a loup-garou type of werewolf.
Yeah, talk about a high-stakes diet.
Yeah. But it just goes to show you how deeply embedded these legends were, whether people truly believed them or whether they were just used as a form of social control. They shaped beliefs, they shaped behaviors, and they even shaped laws.
For sure. These stories weren't just for fun. They were a way for people to make sense of the world, to deal with things they didn't understand, and to, reinforce the values and beliefs that held their communities together.
So we've talked about the cultural origins of werewolves, their symbolic roles, but now I want to hear about some real-life encounters.
Oh, yeah. Eyewitness accounts.
Yes.
Okay, get ready, because we're about to go into the realm of the unexplained. One of the most famous cases is the Beast of Gévaudan, 18th century France.
The Beast of Gévaudan. This creature terrorized a whole region for years. What was it? What made it so terrifying?
The details are a bit fuzzy, typical for a story this old. But what we do know is pretty chilling. It was this large, wolf-like creature, but with some unique features. Not your average wolf. People said it had this reddish-brown coat, broad chest, and a long tail with this tuft of hair on the end.
It's not your average wolf at all.
No. And it wasn't just how it looked. The beast was incredibly strong, agile. It was taking down humans left and right.
This is like something straight out of a nightmare.
It does, doesn't it?
I
And the
know.
attacks were brutal. Over 3 years, this beast killed more than 100 people, mostly women and children.
Over 100 victims. That's terrifying.
It is. And it's no surprise that panic just spread across the whole region.
I can only imagine the chaos.
Yeah.
What did people do to stop it?
Well, people were terrified. I mean, it got so bad that the king got involved. He sent his best hunters to try and track down the beast and kill it.
Wow. Even the king had to step in. So what happened? Did they get it?
Well, they ended up killing a bunch of large wolves. But the attacks, they kept happening. And so then people started to wonder, maybe there's more than one. Or maybe this isn't a normal wolf at all.
So the mystery lives on. Did they ever figure out what it was?
Nope. Nobody knows what the Beast of Gévaudan really was. Some think it was just a pack of wolves. Others say maybe a hyena or some exotic animal that escaped. And then there are those who think it was something more, something unexplainable.
Real-life monster movie.
Right.
I mean, the Beast of Gévaudan isn't the only supposed werewolf encounter. Seems like these creatures keep popping up throughout history, even today.
Right. We may not have kings sending out hunting parties anymore, but people are still seeing these things. And they really seem to like the woods. A lot of the modern reports come from rural parts of the United States, places like Elkhorn, Wisconsin, home of the Bray Road Beast.
Bray Road Beast. Okay, I gotta hear more about this. Wisconsin. Not exactly the first place that comes to mind when I think of werewolves.
I know. But in the 1990s, there was a bunch of sightings, this quiet little area. People were convinced a werewolf was out there. And their descriptions, they were really similar to what you hear from centuries ago. Tall, humanoid figure, wolf-like features, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on all 4s, and glowing eyes, piercing the darkness.
Glowing eyes, walking on 2 legs. That is not a normal dog or wolf.
Right. Pretty creepy. And the Bray Road Beast wasn't an isolated case. There have been reports in other places too, like the Chenango Valley in Pennsylvania, Moraine State Park, the Northwoods. These things like to stay hidden.
Lurking in the shadows.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one thing to hear about legends from hundreds of years ago, but to think that people are still seeing these things today, it's kind of mind-boggling.
Isn't it? It makes you wonder about what's real,
Yeah.
What we really know about the world around us. Are these people really seeing unknown creatures? Or are they just misidentifying things because they're afraid or because of all the stories? Or could it be something else, something we don't understand yet?
That's the big question. And before we jump into all the possible explanations for what people are seeing,
Yeah.
I think we need to consider how pop culture has shaped how we view werewolves, movies and books and all that.
Right. Our understanding of these creatures has definitely been influenced by how they're portrayed and all of that. It's interesting to see how that portrayal has changed over time. It really reflects our own changing fears and what fascinates us.
Yeah, I'm ready for a good old-fashioned werewolf movie marathon. But this time, instead of just enjoying the scares, we're going to be looking for clues, right? Those subtle ways our views of these creatures have changed, and what those changes tell us about how our relationship with the wild has evolved, the unknown and maybe the beast inside us all.
Let's do it. Okay, let's start our werewolf movie marathon with a classic, the OG werewolf movie, 1941, The Wolfman. This one set the standard for how these creatures would be portrayed for years to come.
The Wolfman. Oh, man. Such a good one. I remember being terrified and totally captivated by Lon Chaney Jr.'s transformation. Like, you could practically feel the agony, the horror of becoming this monster.
Exactly, and that's what the film really leaned into, that monstrous side. The transformation was a curse, totally out of the character's control. It was all about losing your humanity, the beast taking over completely.
Like a symbol of our darkest impulses, the things we try to hide but can't always control. And of course, there's the whole silver bullet thing. Like, yeah, werewolves are powerful and scary, but they have a weakness. We can defeat the monster.
Right. It gave people hope, a way to fight back. But then as the years went by, you start to see a change in how werewolves are portrayed. It's not just about the monster anymore. It becomes more about the man trapped inside, that struggle between the human and the beast.
Yeah, totally. I remember that shift in some of those later films. An American Werewolf in London still had the horror elements, but it also had that dark humor. And you really felt the tragedy of the main character's situation. He didn't ask to be a werewolf, but he stuck with it. It's heartbreaking watching him fight this monster inside him.
Yeah, big shift. The werewolf as a victim, burdened by something they didn't choose. And in more recent years, we see even more sympathy for werewolves. Even a little romance thrown in.
You're talking Twilight werewolves now, right?
Yep. Sparkly, brooding.
From terrifying monsters to kind of romantic heroes with a wild side.
Exactly. Still powerful and dangerous, but they're also connected to nature, loyal to their pack, passionate, protective. I mean, kind of appealing, right?
Ultimate bad boy. Only this bad boy has fangs and fur.
Exactly. Like Beauty and the Beast with a supernatural twist. And then you have shows like Teen Wolf, which added all this angst and complexity to the werewolf story.
Oh, yeah. Teen Wolf, I love that show. It really captures that feeling of being a teenager, trying to figure out who you are, where you fit in, trying to control all these crazy new feelings and urges.
Yeah, the werewolf becomes this metaphor for adolescence, all about trying to harness your inner power, even if it's a little scary.
So what do you think these changes tell us about how our perceptions of werewolves have changed?
Well, we're less afraid of the monster now, more fascinated by the idea of transformation, blurring those lines between humans and animals. The werewolf used to be this external threat, something to kill and destroy. Now it's more internal. It's a reflection of our struggles with our own identity, Control. Good and evil.
Yeah, like we're trying to understand the beast inside all of us, trying to find that balance between our instincts and, civilized behavior. Is it possible that we're less worried about threats from the outside world and more worried about what's going on in our own minds?
Maybe. That's a good point. I mean, think about it. We understand the natural world so much better now. Science has explained so much that used to be mysterious. Maybe that's why we're focusing more on what's going on inside us, our own potential for darkness.
So the werewolf used to represent the wilderness out there. Now it represents the wildness inside of us.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's like the werewolf has become this mirror reflecting our own anxieties and desires, our fascination with the wild, and, our search for meaning in a world that can feel pretty crazy sometimes.
And maybe, by exploring these ideas through stories, myths, we can learn more about ourselves, understand our place in the world.
For sure. But let's switch gears for a minute. Let's get a little skeptical here. As much as we like a good monster story, we have to consider the evidence. What are the possible explanations for what people are seeing out there?
Right, back to logic and reason. Could some of these sightings just be cases of mistaken identity? I mean, we do have wolves in lots of parts of the world, right? And they can be scary, especially if you see one in the dark.
Right, a big dog, a wolf with mange, even a bear maybe, if the light is right. It's possible that people are just misinterpreting what they see, especially if they already believe in werewolves.
Our brains like to find patterns, We want to make sense of everything, so maybe we fill in the blanks with our own assumptions and expectations. So, a quick glimpse of something in the woods plus a little fear, easy to turn that into a werewolf in your mind.
Totally. But what about those descriptions of werewolves that sound more human, Walking on two legs, glowing eyes. That's a little harder to explain away as just a simple mistake.
That's where things get really interesting. Have you ever read about rabies? It can make animals act really strangely, like super aggressive, disoriented, even paralyzed. Could rabies be playing a role in some of these sightings?
That's an interesting thought. Rabies does affect the nervous system. Could definitely make an animal's behavior seem more human-like. Like a rabid animal might stumble around, walk awkwardly, might look like it's standing up on two legs. And rabies can cause the eyes to dilate, look all shiny. You know, that glowing effect people talk about?
So a rabid wolf, maybe even a dog, acting all crazy at dusk. It's not a stretch to think someone would see that as a monster.
Right. And knowing rabies is deadly, that fear would just make the experience even more intense, more likely for people to remember it and think they saw something truly terrifying.
Biology and psychology combining to create a werewolf sighting.
Exactly. And it's not just rabies. We have to consider the power of suggestion, too. Mass hysteria. If a whole community is on edge, rumors spreading about werewolves, people are going to be more likely to see what they expect to see, even if there's nothing there.
The placebo effect, but for monster sightings.
Exactly. Our beliefs are powerful. They affect how we see the world. And we can't forget about other psychological factors, too. Hallucinations, sleep paralysis, even really vivid dreams. These experiences can feel totally real. And they often involve fear, anxiety, could easily lead someone to think they've had a supernatural encounter.
Like our brains are playing tricks on us, creating monsters in our minds.
Brains are powerful things. But there's one more explanation I want to talk about: folklore itself. All those old stories. How do you think they shape what people think about werewolves? Do you think they influence what people think they're seeing?
Folklore. I mean, it's powerful. It weaves its way into our beliefs, even in this day and age, when we have science and all that.
Right. For centuries, people used supernatural stories to explain things they couldn't understand. They were trying to make sense of life and death and the world around them.
So are you saying that werewolf legends are just a way of dealing with the fear of the unknown? Trying to find meaning in a world that can be pretty scary and confusing?
Yeah, maybe. Think about it. The fear of the wild, of the unknown. The beast inside us all. These are fears that people have had forever. And werewolf stories give us a way to understand those fears, a way to deal with them.
Like we're giving those fears a name, a shape. And by telling these stories, sharing our fears, maybe we're kind of taming them, both inside ourselves and out in the world.
That's a great way to put it. Stories is how we understand the world, how we connect with each other, how we find meaning in the chaos. And werewolf stories, even though they're scary, they're part of that. They give us a glimpse into our minds, our fears, our hopes, our relationship with nature. And they show how much we're fascinated by the mysteries of the world.
They show that even our darkest fears can be sources of fascination and inspiration.
Exactly. So here we are. We've talked about where these legends come from, the eyewitness accounts, how werewolves are portrayed in movies and books, and even the possible explanations for what people think they're seeing. But the big question remains, are werewolves real? Or are they just a figment of our imagination?
The million-dollar question. And after all of this, I have to say, I don't know. It's complicated.
It is, isn't it? There's no easy answer. No one explanation that covers everything. Maybe it's a mix of folklore, psychology, mistaken identity, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of something we can't explain.
I love that. A little bit of something we can't explain. It keeps things interesting.
It does. And that sense of wonder, that's what keeps us exploring, asking questions, looking for answers.
And as much as I love a good logical explanation, there's a part of me that hopes there's something more out there. Something we don't understand. Something that keeps that sense of wonder alive.
I know what you mean. The unknown, that's what keeps us curious. It pushes us to learn more, to explore, to push the boundaries.
Like that quote, we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And maybe, just maybe, there are werewolves up there among those stars, howling at the moon, reminding us that the universe is full of surprises.
That's a thought that's both scary and amazing. So as we wrap up our deep dive into werewolves, I want to leave you with this question. What do you believe? Are they real? Are they just symbols of our deepest fears? Or maybe, as we've discussed, the answer is somewhere in between.
It's up to you to decide. What do you make of all of this? We've looked at the evidence, we've talked about the possibilities. Now it's your turn.
Keep an open mind. And don't be afraid to question what you think you know.
It's great advice. Always question what you think you know. It's what makes these deep dives so fun.
What I find so interesting is that, even with all the scientific explanations we have today, these creatures, they still capture our imagination. They haven't gone away just because we have science and technology.
It's like they're tapping into something deeper, something beyond logic.
It makes you wonder, why are we still so drawn to these stories of transformation, where the lines between humans and animals get all blurry? Is it because we're fascinated by nature, afraid of what's hidden inside ourselves? Or maybe it's something else altogether?
It's a good question. And after spending all this time really digging into werewolf lore, I'm starting to think there's more to these legends than just, spooky campfire stories. It's like they're telling us something about ourselves, about how we relate to the wild, both out there in nature and within us.
I think so too. They offer this window into the human mind, our anxieties, what we want, how we try to understand the mysteries of the natural world. We've been using these stories for centuries as a way to express our fears, our desires, our search for meaning.
Like they're holding up a mirror, showing us how complex we are. The darkness and the light, our animal nature, and our desire for something more.
I like that. And maybe, just maybe, there's a part of these legends that we just can't explain. A tiny bit of truth hidden beneath all the stories and myths, something that continues to, kind of haunt us.
A tiny bit of truth. It's a great way to think about it. Like a seed that's planted in our minds, waiting for the right moment to grow.
So keep your eyes peeled, Keep asking questions, keep exploring. And if you ever come across something that you just can't explain, something that makes you question everything you thought you knew, let us know.
And that wraps up our deep dive into werewolves. We hope you enjoyed it.
Until next time, stay curious. Keep exploring those mysteries.